So the other day we discussed up to what happens in pneumonia. We are discussing pneumonia, and I told you what are the four protective mechanisms of your lung. And specifically, that will be involved at your alveolar region, in your acidus altogether. Just to recap, those are ciliary function. Normal cilia will act as a protective mechanism. Cough reflex, uh, IgA antibodies, which will serve as your mucosal immunity, and alveolar macrophages, which will engulf any foreign material that is coming into your lung. Right? If there is a defect in one of these four, or all of these four, or in a combination of more than two, there will be a problem wherein pneumonia can occur. And sometimes there are bacteria or what do you call, any particular organisms potent enough to bypass all of these four mechanisms, meaning even if these four mechanisms are present, despite their presence, a pneumonia can occur. Pneumonia is basically an acute inflammation in your lungs. Right now, as I told you the other day, we'll take the classic example of bacterial pneumonia to understand what is happening in pneumonia. Right now, coming back to where we were, we had an alveolus, right? And I told you there is this layer of pseudostratified ciliated epithelium. All right, not going to draw the whole thing. It is basically enveloping all around in your alveolus. Okay, so here, now what happens is, let's draw a few cilia as well. One second. So let us draw a few cilia as well. Let's suppose cilia are greenish in color. Okay, let's suppose these small structures are cilia. Okay, right. Now what is happening is, let's suppose there is a bacteria that is invading your lung or your alveolus. Let's suppose this is the bacteria. Okay, this fellow will release something called an endotoxin. Right, that day I told you, toxins released by your bacteria will be referred to as endotoxins. Right, in inflammation as well, we studied about these endotoxins. If you remember, endotoxins would be released by your bacteria that will in turn trigger inflammation. Now let's suppose these endotoxins are like this. Okay, these small dots that you are able to see, greenish dots, those will be endotoxins. What they do is, they will go to the nearby tissue, this tissue, and cause damage. So the X mark represents damage. All right, these cells will get damaged, and ultimately, let's suppose this is the nearby blood vessel. Because of this damage, what will happen is inflammatory mediators will come into picture, specifically leukotrienes, right? Leukotriene B4, C4, E4, and D4. Right, these four are specifically important for us. Why? Now, the other day when we were discussing, I told you leukotriene B4 specifically acts as a chemotactic agent, where it will go inside your blood vessel and cause chemotaxis. Basically, it will cause attraction of um, other immune cells in your lungs, or the area where endotoxins are creating damage. So basically, it will cause more and more amount of WBCs to come into picture, more monocytes, all of that. Right? That will cause attraction through chemically mediated attraction, basically. Hence, it is called chemotaxis. That is the function of B4. Now, what do these three do? Okay, we'll elaborate that in a different way. Let's do that here. Okay, let me decrease the size of this a little bit so that it can be accommodated. Alright, so we have leukotriene. I'm abbreviating leukotriene as LT. Okay, leukotriene. You have C4, D4, and sorry, E4. Right. These will in turn do three specific functions. What are those functions? Let us elaborate them like this. Okay, for now I'll erase this part on the left. Okay, just so that we can describe this in a better way. Okay, the first function it will do, see, all of these are kind of happening concurrently. So all of this happens at the same time, what C4, E4, and D4 will do. The first thing is, activation of mast cells. All right, you have mast cells around your tissues near your, yeah, near the site of inflammation. In general, in your parenchyma, you have circulating histiocytes, which will be your mast cells. These mast cells, in turn, when they are activated by leukotrienes, these specific leukotrienes, they will produce histamine. Okay, several types of histamine. So histamines are produced. Okay, produced. These histamines, in turn, so right, these histamines in turn cause vasodilation and increase vascular permeability. So on Saturday, I told you the difference between which type of histamine receptor will cause vasodilation and which will cause vasoconstriction. In asthma, I told you histamine causes vasoconstriction. If you remember, I told you in general in your respiratory system, histamine will cause vasoconstriction. This is an exception, and I explained you why it happens in this way. All right. So I'm not going to again repeat that point, but if you remember, you have H1 and H2 receptors. Based on the activity, you will have concurrent vasodilation or vasoconstriction, right? So this is the first function that happens. Second thing that happens is, so from here, right, the first thing is activation of mast cell leading to vasodilation and increase in vascular permeability. Now if there is increased vascular permeability and vasodilation, what will happen is, let's suppose I, for a bit, this is your acinus and this is the underlying blood vessel. What will happen is, because of vasodilation, I will basically dilate this fellow. Okay, so the first thing that will happen is increase in size like this. Okay, vasodilation. Here I'm exaggerating, obviously a blood vessel is not that big, but vasodilation occurs. And second thing is vascular permeability changes. So if you remember, in inflammation, I told you there will be small gaps created in your endothelial cells in the inflammation. So that happens. Basically, gaps like these will start appearing. All right. Because of this, what will happen? The exudate or the plasma material can start moving out from here and entering into your alveolus. The alveolus that is attacked. So you already have a bacteria here. We are assuming that there is bacteria here which is causing release of endotoxins, creating damage and producing this kind of a reaction. Okay. In return, because of the presence of those inflammatory mediators, you are having this kind of reaction. So this is the first thing that is happening because of vasodilation and increased vascular permeability. All right. Vasodilation will basically refer to increasing the size, and vascular permeability will be creating, in a lay term, you would be basically creating these gaps in your blood vessel wall, all right, in the endothelial wall of your blood vessel, leading to pneumonia. Okay, all of them will lead to pneumonia in one way or the other. Second thing that will happen, let me erase this. Okay, I hope you've understood the first part, this part, activation of mast cells and what is happening. All right. Second part is, these leukotrienes will bind to endothelial cells directly, increasing vascular permeability. So in this case, in the first scenario, you had histamines that were causing vascular permeability to change. All right, let me increase the size of this a little bit so that you don't get confused here. Right. So I'll write it as scenario 1, scenario 2, and scenario 3. All these three things will happen one after the other, or they can happen at the same time as well. Generally very close to each other, so that there'll be there rarely will be any enough time to discern in between them. Okay, more often than not, you'll be able to see them happening together. If you remember, inflammation is a cascade reaction wherein several reactions will happen in response to one reaction. This is similar, right? You're basically creating inflammatory reaction here, because leukotriene B4, C4, and D4 are directly binding to endothelial cells of your blood vessel and creating increased vascular permeability. basically increasing vascular permeability. Here it is indirect because histamines are the ones that are causing, right? Here mast cells are getting activated from whom histamines are being released, and they are causing vasodilation and increased vascular permeability or capillary permeability. Here leukotrienes directly will bind to the endothelial cells of your blood vessel and they will increase vascular permeability. Because of this, what will happen is fluid starts to leak out of the, I'll write abbreviate it as BV, blood vessel. Okay, so this is the second thing that happens from your binding of leukotrienes. Immediately fluid starts leaking out. Now this fluid will ultimately get sent into your acinus or into your alveolus, the nearby alveolus, which is getting affected by your endotoxins. Now you know whenever fluid starts building up, what will happen? Something will happen now. Edema, right? Edema happens in that area and fluid starts building up. Basically this is a trigger of inflammation, the indicator of inflammation. That is the second scenario that happens. Third scenario, में क्या हो रहा? These are, I'm explaining them as scenarios, but basically all of them are happening together. Right? Three things that are happening together. Better that way to understand if you want to make it easier for yourself. These bind to respiratory smooth muscle. So you have smooth muscle around your respiratory bronchi and all of that. They will bind to this and cause constriction. Constriction of, I'll just write smooth muscle. Smooth muscle. All right. Because of constriction of smooth muscle, this will lead to bronchospasms. So what is a spasm? I'm not sure whether you've been taught till now or not, but spasms are basically transient contractions. Okay, so basically let's imagine, I'm sure most of you have seen or experienced a muscle cramp at some point of time in your life, right? If you're not having enough amount of oxygen reaching a particular area, or if you have lactic acid buildup in a particular area, let's suppose you've been running for a long period of time and you generally have uh, calf cramps. Okay, cramps in your calf muscle, right? So you know what is a cramp, right? Basically constriction, forceful constriction of your muscles, involuntary obviously, leading to buildup of lactic acid, and in turn basically because of that what is happening is oxygen is not present. Because of anaerobic respiration, the byproduct of glycolysis will be lactic acid instead of pyruvic acid, in turn causing that burning sensation along with a little bit of tightening. Now imagine the same tightening but happening transiently, meaning it is becoming tight and it is becoming loose and again becoming tight. So it is cyclical. Okay. So basically imagine this represents it is constricting, here it is not constricting. So basically it is in a way that there are constrictions and what you call no constrictions in between what you call time intervals. So let's suppose for 5 seconds it is constricting and for 2 seconds it is letting go, 5 seconds it is constricting again and 2 seconds it is letting go. So that is a spasm basically. Now this is a very exaggerated example where I'm telling you it will constrict for 5 minutes, 5 seconds and let go for 2 seconds, but it will be more like a pulsation. Okay, that is a spasm and that spot will become very tender. Another example, common example would be back spasms. Okay, so if you fall from some height or in an odd angle on your back, your rectus what do you call, your rectus muscle on your back, that will undergo spasm. Okay, uh, if you know what is the rectus muscle of your back, the muscle that is lining your, let's imagine this is your if this is your spinal cord, you will have two muscles running around like this. If you have a very lean person, you'll be able to actually see these muscles. If you just touch your back, you'll be able to see something that is present directly beside your vertebral column. It will not be on the vertebral column, it will be exactly beside it. Okay, that is the rectus muscle. Now that muscle can also undergo spasm. That is pretty common to undergo spasm. What will happen is that spot will become very tender, so that is a spasm. Now here what is happening is because of constriction of smooth muscle, it will undergo bronchospasms, if there is bronchospasms, basically your bronchi are contracting and letting go. Most of the time contracting, mostly more contraction will be there rather than letting go, because of which they become tender. This in turn will lead to shortness of breath or dyspnea, right? The patient will not be able to breathe properly. These both will lead to pneumonia. All right, these both are symptoms of your pneumonia. So will be your SOB. Okay, I hope you understand this chart here. This is the basic pathophysiology of your pneumonia. What is happening? We'll still get into stages and all, but this is what is happening at a cellular level in pneumonia, right? We started off with a normal, what do you call this thing? Bacteria, that is our normal alveolus that is getting infected by a bacteria, right? Imagine this is the alveolus and here is your bacteria. This bacteria is coming, causing damage to the cells here, to the cell lining of your alveolus, and in turn your cell lining will start releasing inflammatory mediators whenever it is damaged. That inflammatory mediators will be in the form of leukotrienes, which are specifically, sorry, 1 second, leukotriene B4, C4, D4 and E4. Leukotriene B4 will act as a chemotactic agent where it is attracting other immune cells. Okay, that is a function of B4. C4, D4, E4 have three specific functions, wherein the first function is activation of mast cell leading to vasodilation and increased vascular permeability through histamines. Okay, this is indirect method. Directly they will attach to the endothelial cells of the underlying blood vessels, so there will be blood vessels around here. Okay, these blood vessels are getting affected. Now, whenever leukotrienes will go and attach directly to the blood vessel, it in turn causes capillary permeability to change. Both this and this will cause fluid to start leaking because of excessive permeability. Fluid will start moving out. At one point, the components of your blood will also start moving out. We'll discuss that shortly. But what is happening is, because of fluid being built up here, ultimately what ends up happening is, here you will have, let's do edema in this color. Here you will start having fluid buildup in your acinus. Here I'm drawing in the alveolus, but imagine this happening in the whole of your acinus, leading to edema. All right, this is a classic sign of your pneumonia. The third thing that will happen is the respiratory smooth muscle which is present here, that now you have respiratory smooth muscle lining your bronchi and all. So if I have my bronchi like this, an extension of my bronchi, let me draw it this way. So imagine this is the respiratory bronchiole coming and it is ending up in a alveolus. All right, so you will have, let's do your muscle in this color. Okay, imagine the muscle is present here. It is present in the lining itself. I'm just exaggerating so that you can understand. All right, it is lining here in the bronchi. So what will happen is, these fellows, leukotriene C4, D4, E4 will come and act here, okay, in this place and in this place. Okay, and they will cause constriction in your smooth muscle, leading to bronchospasms, which in turn, if this is spasming, what will happen is, basically the size of this fellow is decreasing, so your bronchiole will start looking like this. Okay, so it has I'm obviously exaggerating a lot, but here you can see constriction. Because of this constriction, you'll not be able to have proper gas exchange, which will lead to shortness of breath. All right, if it is happening in one a single alveolus, it is not that big of a problem, but generally pneumonia affects lobes or lobules, so a big part of your lung will get affected, which in turn causes significant decrease in the amount of respiration or the amount of what do you call, oxygen that you can breathe in, and the amount of oxygen that is accessible to you. All right, I hope you understood this. If you have any doubts on this, please let me know right now. I can clear those doubts for you. No one has any doubts?
No, sir.
बोलो क्या डाउट है? डाउट नहीं है?
No doubt, sir.
ओके, चलो ठीक है. Very well then. Now coming to the stages of pneumonia, now as pneumonia progresses, we'll divide them into stages based on the number of days it is occurring. So from the start of an inflammatory reaction to what is happening. Now whenever we have pneumonia, edema buildup and all, there is another fellow that comes into picture, which is your macrophages. Okay, what macrophages do is, in that acinus, let's suppose this is the acinus and here is your bacteria like this. Imagine this is your bacteria. Now your macrophages, alveolar macrophages specifically, yeah, imagine this is your macrophage. This fellow will phagocytose this bacteria. Okay, that is the primary function of your macrophage, that is trying to help in phagocytizing, and it is basically a part of your immune system where it is trying to keep the normal function of your alveolus intact. The problem is there will not be only a single bacteria that is coming into picture. There'll be millions of bacteria that come, or at least thousands of bacteria that come, and there is a limited number of macrophages that are present. That is why inflammation is triggered, so that more macrophages can come to the picture. More, basically, what is happening is, imagine a lot of bad guys are coming into your vertical house, and you are recruiting more amount of. You are basically calling police instead of just you defending yourself. You are calling other people as well. Okay, that is what is happening in inflammation. Now here, whenever macrophage engulfs a bacteria, so let me draw it again in this way. So here you have the macrophage. Here is the nucleus of the macrophage. The macrophage, I hope you remember the mechanism of phagocytosis, but you will end up with a phagosome or an endosome with the bacteria inside it. All right, so that is how phagocytosis works. Whenever this bacteria is present inside, your macrophage in turn will start releasing three things. Okay, that will be interleukin 1, interleukin 8, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. If you remember, these are also mediators of inflammation. Specifically, what will happen is, interleukin 8 will cause chemotaxis. Basically, it will start calling other immune system cells. Interleukin 1 and TNF alpha. Interleukin 1 will be responsible for increasing vascular permeability. So increasing vascular permeability. Now you can see that there are several factors that are affecting vascular permeability, which in turn will lead to edema. It is histamine from mast cells, it is leukotrienes directly, then there is interleukins as well. All of them will change the vascular permeability. This fellow TNF alpha will cause pyrexia. Basically, it will be responsible for causing fever, right? That is why whenever someone has pneumonia and whenever they are having lung problems with fever, it is generally indicated as pneumonia. All right, or at least they will have fever. Pneumonia patients, one of the first responses they will give is fever. All right, now coming to stages of, I hope you understood that part. Now coming to stages of pneumonia, how you, based on the progression of the disease, you will divide them into four categories. Okay, so the first one, stage 1, is called fluid buildup. Okay, this will happen in day 1 to 2. Fluid will start building up because there is edema. Now you have your normal acinus, right, and you have a blood vessel around here. Let's suppose I'm already causing vasodilation. So let me draw it this way. Let's suppose that orange line represents the vertical initial vertical size of that blood vessel, and now the red line represents the dilated blood vessel, so it has increased in size. Okay, this is so that you understand during the diagram. Okay, if you're not understanding anything throughout this procedure, please stop me, I'll explain again. All right, so what is happening because of varied capillary permeability, this fellow is becoming like this. There are gaps created in your endothelium of your blood vessel, right, and fluid which is present inside your blood vessel will start moving out towards the acinus to a point where you will have proper edema that is filling up your, let's suppose in your acinus and in your alveolar sac alveolus, there is fluid being built up like this. All right, this is the first stage where fluid buildup occurs. This occurs generally between first and the second day. Okay, it's also called stage of congestion because you have fluid being built up inside congestion stage, right? Because you have fluid being built up inside, you will not be able to breathe, and you will have a lot of congestion in your lung, right? So exudate fluid will also collect in this area, right? If exudate fluid is basically fluid containing proteins. Now obviously your blood will have a lot of proteins present inside it. Okay, let me draw blood like this. Let's suppose this is blood. Okay, you know blood has a lot of proteins flowing around in it, right? Now these proteins, if mm, this damage that you can see in, okay, let me do it in a different color, pink, right? This damage that you can see, okay, this fellow, this damage, if it is very extensive, what will happen is proteins will start leaking out, and the fluid that gets built up is pretty heavy and very thick in a sense. Okay, it will be rich in proteins. That fluid will be called exudate. Okay, that is the difference between exudate and transudate. Exudate fluid, this is rich in proteins, so it will have a lot of proteins coming in from your blood specifically. All right, another thing that will happen is, if this damage is extensive enough, this damage that I just represent, this damage capillary, if there are large enough holes created in your capillary, what will happen is RBCs will start moving out. So you will see RBCs flowing along with the exudated fluid. So RBCs will come out and they will start what you call invading your lung spaces and all. Okay, they will basically leak out to an extent that your alveolus will go into the second stage of pneumonia. So this is stage 2. This is called red hepatization stage. All right, this occurs in during day 3 and day 4. Day 3 to day 4. Okay. Now what happens during this time is, because of extensive damage, you will also have fibrin strands coming in. So let me draw fibrin this way. Let's suppose this is Odia. Right. Imagine this is a fibrin strand. Now, if I hope you know what is fibrin. Okay, it is one of the extracellular matrix material. Okay, so fibrin strands will start getting accumulated in the area as well because of damage to your capillary, that they will start leaking out as well. And fibrin in turn, now you know fibrin has an important role in coagulation and in clotting, right? If it is present in your acinus, or it starts getting accumulated in your acinus, what will happen is consolidation starts occurring. So this part that you are seeing, this edematous part, will start getting thicker and thicker, and it will start getting congealed. Okay, it will start becoming like a clot. Okay, if this is happening in one particular lobe, it is not a problem, but one particular alveolus, it is not that big of a problem. But if it starts occurring in a whole lobe or in a lobule, that is a problem. Okay, because a big part of your lung will start getting affected. You will not be able to breathe properly because there is thickening like this. Okay, from red hepatization, eventually these blood vessels, or your eventually your RBCs will die, or they are destroyed because of the inflammation occurring here, and you will enter stage 3, which is gray hepatization stage. All right, this will occur in day 4 to 7. All right, so first what happened is fluid started building up, causing congestion. Ultimately, because of extensive damage to your endothelial cells of your blood vessel, you had RBCs moving out during day 3 and 4. Eventually what will happen is these RBCs will start getting damaged because of the inflammatory reaction that is occurring, and they will die, leading to gray hepatization phase. Right, whenever RBCs die, they will start looking gray in color. Right, now during this period of time, because of fibrin being released, consolidation occurs, and this in turn might lead to hypoxia itself. Alright, decreased amount of oxygen being present here. This ultimately will lead to, now generally what happens is, after this comes the fate of pneumonia, but we'll discuss that shortly. If you are able to control the inflammation at this point, and if your body is healing at this point, so from gray hepatization, what will happen is stage 4, resolution. Resolution generally occurs greater than day 8. Okay, so resolution is a stage where your lung is starting to heal. Okay, so it's basically getting consolidated, or damage is being, the bacteria is being cornered, and all of that is happening. Whenever there is breakdown of your gray hepatization, what will happen is RBC, WBC, fibrin, all of them will get broken down, and you will start coughing. So the cough will be productive, the cough will have a lot of sputum, and sometimes the patient will also have hemoptysis, where they are having blood in their what do you call, sputum, or their sputum starts looking red. This can happen in the stage of red hepatization, it can happen in the stage of gray hepatization, sometimes even in resolution, rarely, but sometimes it can happen. See, basically what is happening is whenever you're not able to breathe, you'll there'll be improper breathing right from stage of congestion, because your airways are getting blocked, you'll not be able to breathe properly, because of which coughing occurs. Now cough is a normal response, involuntary response by your body, wherein you're not able to breathe, because of which your body is spasming. That spasm of your diaphragm causes cough, right? Spasm of your bronchi, sorry, not your diaphragm. This in turn, if it goes on, because there is sputum being accumulated, edema, and you have a lot of pus as well because of the damage, right? Whenever there is inflammation, there'll be pus. What happens, ends up happening is you will start having expectorant cough. So a lot of expectoration occurs, a lot of things start coming out in your cough, specifically sputum and pus, right? This might even smell a little bit weird because of the presence of bacteria, right? Sometimes if there is pus, right, so that is basically called a purulent cough, right? Pus, like pus containing cough. Now this ultimately what happens is, up to day 8, if you are going to a hospital and taking medication and all of that, this will start getting resolved and it will heal, right? We'll go into what happens parallelly along with resolution later on. So there are a few complications as well. Sometimes complete healing will not occur as such. Okay, so this is the basic of the stages. Now I need to ask you one thing: have you been taught what is ventilation perfusion ratio in physiology, or anywhere else? What is V by Q ratio in what do you call, med surg as well? Have you guys been taught ventilation perfusion? Because the next part will rely on you knowing ventilation perfusion ratio. If you don't know, I'll explain.
No, sir.
I
We
can't
don't
hear
know.
you. I'm not able to hear you, Ganesh. Type it in. Your voice is very choppy. No, okay. So you haven't been done. Now, ventilation perfusion ratio basically relates to the ratio of the amount of ventilation and perfusion to one particular alveolus. Okay. Basically meaning that, suppose I take one average alveolus like this. Okay. In this, the amount of ventilation per minute. Now, depending on the respiratory rate and tidal volume, you will have a total of 4 liters of oxygen or 4 liters of gas coming in and going out per minute. Okay, I hope you know that. That is basically, you will be taught about that in respiration. 4 liters of air, okay, gas will come in and be breathed out. Basically, inhalation and exhalation of 4 liters of gas occurs per minute. Similarly, as per perfusion, in 1 minute, 5 liters of blood will go through this spot. Right? If you remember cardiac output and total stroke volume and the amount of circulatory volume, you will know that 5 liters of blood will circulate all around your body per minute. Meaning, if I take any average alveolus, let's suppose I take this alveolus, I know that it is being perfused by 5 liters of blood per minute. All right, even if I take a single asinus, I know that 5 liters of blood is reaching this part in 1 minute. All right, so if I compare this ratio, 4 liters of gas by 5 liters of blood, I will get the ratio of 0.8. This 0.8 represents normal ventilation perfusion ratio. Meaning, if the ratio is 0.8, I know the patient has normal amount of ventilation in their lungs, wherein they are able to perform, or they are able to live normally, and they have enough amount of perfusion or blood supply so that they can function normally. Okay, that is ventilation perfusion ratio. I hope you understand what is V by Q. V represents ventilation, Q represents perfusion. All right. समझ में आया what is ventilation and perfusion?
Sir, please repeat, sir.
Repeat. Okay. एक second. If I take one alveolus, ठीक है, based on your respiration, the rate of your respiration and the amount of tidal volume or inspiratory maximum inspiratory volume and how much you breathe in and breathe out in 1 minute, you will inhale and exhale a total of 4 liters of gas. Okay, so I know that any ordinary alveolus that I take, any average alveolus that I take, it will be ventilated with 4 liters of gas, meaning 4 liters of gas is coming in any alveolus in 1 minute. All right. Okay, यहाँ तक समझ में आया?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, similarly, in that same minute, I know because blood is flowing all around your body. Okay, let's suppose this circle, that oval represents circulation from your head to toe and back. Okay, so you're going all the way from your heart to the lowest extremity, going everywhere and coming back like this. Okay, just a general example so that you have an idea. You know that 5 liters of blood will move all around your body in 1 minute, correct? So every part of your body is getting 5 liters of blood in 1 minute. See, if if 5 liters of blood is moving all around your body in 1 minute, it also means that if I take one reference, let's suppose I take a liver. Okay, if I take liver as a reference, in that whole 1 minute, I know that it is experiencing a total load of 5 liters, right? Meaning 5 liters of blood will pass through liver in 1 minute. The same way, in your alveolus, any average alveolus, I know that 5 liters of blood will pass nearby it, right? That is the average perfusion that it is getting. Okay, it does not matter how much amount it is getting in 1 second. I know that in every minute it will get 5 liters on an average because circulation is not stopping, right? Blood keeps on circulating and 5 liters of blood will keep on circulating all around. If I take what do you call one point as a reference, if I take the alveolus as a reference, or if I take your liver as a reference, or if I take kidney as a reference, all of them will experience the same amount of perfusion. The amount will be different in the sense that some organs will be more perfused, meaning they might have more blood vessels, but the same blood vessel, let's suppose one organ, let's suppose I take your liver, which is highly perfused, and your bone, okay, which is less perfused. Okay, I hope you know this. Some organs are less perfused, some organs are more perfused. I know that even if this fellow gets more amount of blood, 5 liters will pass through this and 5 liters will pass through this, no matter how much amount is getting to it. All right. So the same way, your alveolus will also get 5 liters. Now, if you take the ratio of these two, you will get 0.8. That is your ventilation perfusion ratio. All right, we have less than a minute left. I hope that explains what is V by Q ratio. This is ventilation and this is perfusion. Okay, we'll continue tomorrow. Right?
Yes, sir.
चलो ठीक है.